prayer this evening is from Councilmember Ron Washington. Mr. Washington.
Thank you, Mayor. Would all bow with me for a moment of silence, please? Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council, June 4th, 2009. Many of you may have turned on Channel 3 at 5 o'clock and noticed that we had begun our deliberations over the tentative budget for the City of Murfreesboro for the upcoming fiscal year, and we will continue those meetings and discussions of other departments that we did not get to this afternoon. That will be on Monday, and I believe that's at 4 o'clock, so that'll be June the 7th, I believe, at 4 o'clock, 5, 6, 7. June the 8th, that's what I said, at 4 o'clock here in the council chambers, and those will be televised live also. So those of you who are interested in the budget of the City of Murfreesboro, the tentative budget, and the way we deliberate, certainly we would encourage you to watch at 4 o'clock on June the 8th, which is Monday afternoon. Council members, you have before you your consent agenda. If you've had an opportunity to look at that, are there any questions or deletions or anything else on our consent agenda? Are you ready for a motion?
Move we adopt the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second on the consent agenda. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time you have before you the minutes of meetings held on May 14th, a regular meeting, and May 21st, a regular meeting. You have those minutes. If you've had an opportunity to look at those, are there any additions or deletions, or are you ready for a motion?
Move for approval. Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on third and final reading an ordinance to rezone an area west of Dill Lane to a planned residential development, PRD district.
Move for approval on third and final reading.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time you have before you for passage on third and final reading an ordinance amending Appendix A zoning, Sections 2, 4, 7, 9, 13, 15, 18, 19, 20, 24, 25, Chart 1, and Chart 2. These all pertain to definitions and charts, updating terms, reorganizing, and renumbering existing text and other amendments.
So moved. Second.
Call the roll, please, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for passage on second reading an ordinance amending Murfreesboro City Code, Chapter 8, Cemeteries, Section 8-2, 8-3, 8-5, reducing the percentage of proceeds placed in the perpetual trust fund, modifying scheduling requirements, and clarifying the provisions.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to annex an area located along DeJarnett Lane and to adopt for the same a plan of services.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to annex an area located along Manchester Highway and to adopt for the same a plan of services.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to amend 183.33 acre zoned planned residential development, PRD district, located along Fortress Boulevard.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance amending Chapter 33 Waters and Sewers of the Murfreesboro City Code Section 33-1, 33-2, and 33-51 dealing with sewer rates, fees, and charges. Mr. Kirchner. Ms. McGannon.
Mayor, I wanted to call the council's attention to the fact there was a substitute for this placed on your table tonight. There were 2 typographical errors, so when you consider this, if you would consider the substituted version, please.
All right, Mr. Kirchner.
This is the sewer increase that's required to make our balanced budget, the additional revenue, $252,500,000. It's basically increasing the sewer rate by 80 cents, 60 cents on the sanitary sewer fee, and 20 cents on the O&M fee. Also, it increases the water tap fee from $950 to $1,200, and the sewer tap fee to $2,550 from $2,300.
Any questions for Mr. Kirchner on this amendment? I think we talked about that today, the average ratepayer.
Yes.
$3 1/4.
3 and a quarter, $3.60, something on an average home of 600 cubic feet. Was that
Yes,
it?
sir. And the 200 cubic feet user would be 40 cents a month. That would be the minimum user.
The average would be 3 1/4, is that what you said?
360, I believe.
360?
The majority of the average of our usage
Right.
is about 600. It'd be, I think it was 358 a month.
Other questions?
No other questions, Mayor, move for passage on first reading.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Consider now for passage on first reading an ordinance amending Chapter 33 Waters and Sewers, Article 2, Cross Connection Control Program of the Murfreesboro City Code, Section 3318, 3319, and 3321, dealing with hazards.
Yes, these are changes that the Tennessee Department of Environment Conservation asked us to make to our program.
So moved.
Second.
All right, you have a motion, second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards. Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Consider now adoption of a resolution approving fees of the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Department for service initiation, return checks and reconnection, and fees for administration of the Cross Connection Control Program.
Yes, these are the, as I mentioned in the budget review, the the increases in fees, the service initiation fee of $50 for same-day request, $40 for any day thereafter, return check fee of $30, reconnection after a disconnection for non-payment of $40 during regular hours, and $75 after regular hours and weekends. And in addition, there's a $35 annual inspection for the cross-connection devices, and it increases as if the first follow-up is free, and then after that it'd be $50 and it escalates to $100 until it passes. Hopefully it passes on the first.
Are these in line with what other cities around us do?
Yes. Yeah, we looked at other communities, and what right off the top of my head, I can't remember what they are, but I can provide you a list of those that we looked at.
What are your wishes?
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other information we need from the council members at this time pertaining to our review of the 2009-2010 City of Murfreesboro tentative budget?
Mayor, we included this item on the agenda in the event we didn't get through all the items from your 5 o'clock session. Unless you had something further, that was why we had that on the agenda.
All right, if there's nothing else, we'll now consider for passage on first reading an ordinance, the tax rate ordinance. This would be on first reading. It would be subject to anything else that we do and determine during our further deliberations on the tentative budget. This would just be on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and second on first reading of the tax rate ordinance. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance, the appropriations ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time we'll consider any beer permit applications. Ms. Wright?
Mayor, we have 3 tonight. We have a restaurant at 417 North Thompson Lane, which is a new location. We have a restaurant at 810 Northwest Broad Street, which is an ownership change, and a restaurant at 851 North Thompson Lane, Suite G, which is a new location. They have met all of our requirements.
All right.
Mayor, move to be approved.
Second.
Motion is second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You have a revised list of the statements to be considered for payment. If there are any questions, please bring those to the floor now. If not, are you ready for a motion?
Move we pay the bills.
Second.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Under other business tonight, I have the following recommendations for reappointment to our commission and boards in the city of Murfreesboro. Our Public Building Authority reappoint Ted LaRoche and Wayne Belt. Our Planning Commission reappoint Bob Lamb. Board of Zoning Appeals reappoint Ken Halliburton. Cable Television Commission reappoint David Edwards. Construction Board of Adjustments and Appeals reappoint Carol Sneed Lester, Logan Hickerson, and Mike Pickelsheimer. Park and Recreation Commission reappoint Tim Rodiger and Harold Yoakley. City Hall Art Committee reappoint Lisa Sims and Missy Veazey. And the Urban Environmental Commission, reappoint George Hanson, Carl Montgomery, Catherine Moore, Linda Roberts, and Addie Sue Webb. I make those recommendations to you.
Move we approve the mayor's recommendations.
Second.
Motion second. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Bratcher.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. McFarland.
Aye.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider any other business to come before the council from staff or the council.
Mayor,
Yes.
just so I know you were sitting on edge wondering how the Murfreesboro Half Marathon's doing,
I was.
but
I could take that report after the meeting.
everything's going well. I thought you would want to know that Vice Mayor Bratcher has agreed to set up a lemonade stand on the route. He's donating the funds to the general fund to help with the budget. So
He has always been a lemon in the crowd. You're exactly right.
registration is still going.
All right. Thank you. Anything else? You're adjourned.